Hello there, people of the internet. We have a couple of different things going on here today. First off, I'm trying out a new camera. My old camera setup was like just falling apart. Long story short, the old GoPro that I had just completely, well, it didn't completely stop working. I will say that it does still record stuff, but man, is it sketchy. So I got myself this one. This one has a better microphone. Hopefully we're going to have some less wind noise whenever I actually get out to the gun range, but we're going to see how all of that goes. I'm here doing a collaboration with a couple of other different gun channels. We did a collaboration that was similar to this with Oviedo Mausers from Spain, or just the 1893 pattern of Mauser in general. And now we're going to do essentially the same thing with Swiss rifles, the Swiss Schmid-Reuben style straight pull bolt action rifle. So I'm doing this collaboration with Geary Gunderson, Mississippi Milsurps, and Movie Maker 225. The links for all of their channels are going to be in the description down below. Essentially what we're doing, I'm going to talk about my pros and cons behind the systems, which are these right here, and then we're going to talk about the other people's pros and cons. If you notice, our recording space is not our normal recording space. That is because as of right now I'm currently moving some stuff around. I'm trying to build a proper recording spot versus just the corner of the storage room, which is what I have been doing, and I have not quite finished that task yet. As a matter of fact, that might take a minute. So instead of doing that, I came into this room, which is the guest room, which is also where I store the guitars. And we're going to just kind of sit here and do this collaboration video. I would have liked to go out to the gun range, but I just don't have the time right now. As a matter of fact, I barely have the time to do this. So we're going to get into this because, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of time to spare. So I'm going to address my pros and then my cons, and then I'll go over the list of the other guys. So a couple of massive pros with these rifles here. We're going to be talking about the 7.5 by 55 chambered rifles, not the old school semi-smokeless powder sort of cartridges that came before this technology. So the 7.5 Swiss cartridge is about on par with that of 308. It's a 150 grain-ish bullet that moves about 2,800 or so feet per second. So if you're familiar with 308, then you're going to be very familiar with that cartridge. A little bit longer, but like I said, it's basically on par with the ballistic capabilities of that of the 308. Alright, another big benefit with these rifles, they have external mags. You just press a little button, pull your mag out, so if you have multiple magazines, you're going to have very fast, easy reloads. The one thing that I think I'm going to save that for the cons section. So we'll kind of jump back into reloading these rifles whenever that time comes around. But external mags, if you got yourself a bunch of them, they even make like higher capacity magazines for these rifles in the event that that's what you want to go with. They exist. They're very easy to swap out. Just press this button, out, in, and then you keep running your gun. Alright, another big pro. These right here are straight pull actions. I know that there is definitely some pros and cons whenever we're talking about like turn bolt rifles versus straight pulls. These rifles can be shot very rapidly. It's a very fast system because you don't have to worry about pulling a bolt upwards, then back and forward, and then pushing it back down to lock the bolt in place. With these right here, all you really have to worry about is bolt back, bolt forward. Now I gotta pull the magazine because this right here does have a magazine catch on it to let you know that you're out of ammunition. Back, forward, and then you pull the trigger. Bang, and it goes bang. I also like the cocking piece on these. If you're shooting old surplus ammunition, depending on where it came from, not really an issue with Swiss stuff, but it can be a little sketchy. Sometimes you might have to recock your rifle if you're dealing with like duds and hang fires, that style of ammunition. So this right here just has a little cocking piece that you can pull back versus like some other kinds of rifles, like say the Mauser Model 93, which doesn't really have a way to cock the rifle without taking it out of battery. So definitely a benefit towards the rifle. These rifles are also extremely accurate. I think the world record is actually held with a K31 for longest iron sight shot. So these rifles, they're just extremely well made, and they never really saw a whole lot of conflict. I don't want to say a whole lot of use, because they saw plenty of use, but they didn't really see a whole lot of conflict, and as a result, they tend to be in nice shape, which is another pro that I was going to get to. Very accurate rifles tend to be pretty gosh darn nice rifles as well, just because they weren't really involved in any real major schisms. I'm going to use that word schism because it's a word I have not used yet. Of course, I guess that lack of conflict kind of leads to one of my cons. So we'll start going into cons, because these rifles have a lack of history behind them. They got their history, but it's not the juicy history that people seem to love whenever it comes to wanting a rifle that was involved in some kind of conflict somewhere, and then at the same time wanting that rifle to be in absolutely pristine shape. It's just an argument in and of itself. But not a whole lot of history behind these rifles, just because they didn't really see or do very much. These little bolt handle pieces on your pre-K31 rifles were actually made of like a rubber substance. That rubber, now that it's 100+ years old, it just tends to break apart and flake and fall off. And of course you can get like new reproduction ones that you can stick onto your rifle, but at that point you're sticking new production stuff on an old rifle. It's just not original. And if you have yourself an all original gun, sticking reproduction stuff on there just doesn't really have that kind of appeal. If it's a sporter rifle, do whatever the hell you want, but if it's an original configuration, it's just one of the issues that I have with these Schmid-Reuben straight pull rifles. The old rubber grips right here, they fall apart because they're a century old. So that's definitely a con of mine. Your pre-K31 rifles actually had a different bolt design in them, and the bolt design for those particular rifles are quite a deal larger than our K31 that we have right here. If you see this looks like your pretty standard stereotypical bolt size, but if you get like a K11 or something like that, you're gonna have the actual like head of that bolt sticking out about this far. Anyone who's ever seen Dragon Ball Z, like the bolt looks like Frieza in his third form. Just the head just juts out another, foot this way. It's a massive bolt, and as a result, the receivers are quite massive on those, and they're very heavy. Those are very heavy, cumbersome guns. That is definitely a con of mine whenever it comes to these rifles. The K31 absolutely took care of that. This is like a Cadillac of a rifle. I am very happy owning a K31. Alright, now this is kind of a niche one. A niche one, just because of my style of reloading. Whenever I reload, I normally don't size and trim brass unless I have to. That does equate to poorer accuracy, but I'm not very accurate myself. If I'm doing bench rest shooting and trying to get nice tight groups, then of course I'm going to want consistency, so everything's going to be sized and trimmed to exact specifications, but for the most part, I just clink into garbage, so I don't really need to do that. So as long as the cartridge is still within usable spec, I don't bother sizing or trimming. That being said, 7.5 Swiss, for whatever reason, like every single shot needs to be sized and trimmed. That is my experience. I've ran it through multiple rifles. I'm sure you guys have the same experiences out there. Just every single cartridge needs to be sized and trimmed, because for some reason, the way that the brass expands for 7.5 Swiss, it just requires it. I mean, you take the measurements and it's beyond what is necessary. So if you're a reloader for 7.5 Swiss, you have to prep the brass every single time, and by Jove, that is annoying. Okay, this is one I've heard from other people, and I've actually seen it myself with one particular example. It was a 9611, I think that was the designation of it. These rifles, if you actually take a slug and you slug the barrel, they normally swage out to a 308 diameter, which means that you can use normal 308 bullets in it. But every now and then you'll get one that has a little bit skinnier of a barrel, and it comes out to more of a 306 diameter bore. And if you stick 308 rounds in it, you're not going to have any pressures with, or any issues with like overpressure or anything like that. People dramatically overestimate 0.002 of an inch whenever it comes to bullet size, unless we're talking about like all steel bullets or something like that. Copper is a nice soft material. You might have some issue with like alloy jackets or something like that, but for the most part your 7.5 rounds are going to be either copper or nickel plated. But whenever it comes to those bullets, if you have a rifle that has that .306 diameter bore inside of it, you can lead to poorer accuracy, and that just kind of equates to the bullet just not quite being the exact size of the bore that it needs to be. And I've seen that in guns before. Whenever we're talking about military surplus stuff, we're talking about guns that are mass manufactured, and you're just going to get some occasional discrepancies. I mean, look at the Mosin Nagant, for instance. People out there will preach all day, every day, the Mosin Nagant is a 311 diameter bore, and then you'll get ones that have like 313 diameter, or ones I've seen as low as like 309 diameter. That's why some just run 308 projectiles really well. But yeah, go out and slug your barrel and see what it actually comes out to, then you'll know what bullet diameters you actually need. Okay, so those are my pros and cons. And the cons with this right here, that last one was a really nitpicky one because 308 bullets basically work in all of these. But if you have one that's a little bit more tight than 308, like say the 306, then you might get less accuracy than what would be optimal. However, if you're like me and you're just mag dumping into garbage, who really cares? We're going to start going over other people's stuff now, their pros and cons. So let me grab my trusty dusty phone here because I do not have their stuff memorized, and we will scroll through the Discord, which is in the description down below if you want to hop in. Okay, Mississippi Milsurp. We're going to start going over his pros and cons, and I'm going to gauge my response to them. He says the Swiss rifles are the Cadillac of Milsurps. I agree. I literally said that earlier. I have not read these yet. I wanted to save this reaction for the camera, so I made it a point not to actually read these. So I'm glad he agrees. They are very nice. They are in exceptional shape, and they're very accurate. Again, these are pros that I myself stated with what I was talking about before. He says, straight pulls seem scary, but once you understand the locking mechanism, it makes sense. Okay, I have heard this before. I have had people tell me they don't like straight pull rifles because they don't want the bolt going back in the face. But these people don't realize that these rifles actually have a cam system and a locking system just like your turn bolt rifles. The only difference is it's operating on a cam, which you can see right there, as opposed to like you manually doing it with your hand. Straight pull rifles are not less safe than turn bolt rifles, so if you're fine with turn bolt rifles, and I can't seem to get this bolting, if you're fine with turn bolt rifles, then you shouldn't have any issues with straight pulls. There we go. Speaking of issues with straight pulls, I don't know why that was giving me such issue. Alright, what's next? It says the Swiss 1911s have magazine cutoffs so you can manage your magazine in reserve for hairy situations. 1895 called. They want their doctrine back. If you have to reserve your magazine for a hairy situation, go out and get yourself an AR because that's not the rifle that you want. It says the Swiss K11 was the pinnacle of Swiss rifles. I disagree with that one, but let's continue reading. Shorter than the K31s and slightly heavier to get rid of recoil of the 7.5. Okay. Alright, there's a lot to unpack with that one. I will acknowledge that it is slightly shorter. You do save a little bit of weight with the shortness, but that massive receiver and that massive bolt, just the amount of movement that you have to have with those rifles, I gotta disagree on that one. The K31 is superior, not only in accuracy from what I have seen with my own testing. As a matter of fact, I have quite a few of these Swiss rifles. We're going to make a video and go out and test them for accuracy. I feel like that would be a very fun video. Stay tuned for that one because I'll work on that. But in my experience, the K31 do tend to be more accurate. I think it's because the K31s tend to always have that 308 diameter bore versus the older versions, which the bores kind of vary. That kind of stems from the technology from the time period whenever they were made. I will acknowledge that they are heavier. That does equate to less recoil, but the 7.5 Swiss doesn't exactly have a whole lot of recoil behind it. Anyway, it's not like we're going out and shooting 300 Win Mag. The K31 was a stupid and unnecessary upgrade that didn't do anything to actually improve anything, but for some reason tends to add $300 premium over a K11. Maybe he doesn't know how the bolts actually look in these things. Okay, you guys wait right here. I'm gonna have to venture to my closet and dig out one of my my other rifles, one of my other Swiss rifles, like an older version. Alright, Jesus Christ, after that experience, I have a new con for these rifles. Those straight pulls don't store very well. All my rifles in storage, I have most of them are turn bolt, and I have the bolts open, so they slide into the receptacles real easy, real nice. Can't do that with this, it's just got this big thing jutting out the side. Okay, where is my K11? Let me come grab this. Granted, this is a long rifle, so the whole short thing for the K31, this is not a carbine, this is a full-length rifle, so I cannot attest to that. But if we pull out our K31 bolt here, and let me set my K31 to the side here in a way that doesn't actually damage the rifle. Okay, here's our K31 bolt. Here is our, essentially your 1911 style of rifle bolt. This particular one is a 9611, but I'm fairly certain that these right here are identical. As a matter of fact, I think this bolt right here is actually from the G11 series. So that is significantly different than something like this. The bolt throw on this is quite a deal larger. The receiver size on these rifles, look at that. That is wildly different and larger. So the K11, in my personal opinion, is definitely not the superior system, and the K31 is not an unnecessary upgrade. As a matter of fact, it is a very, very smart and economic upgrade, especially because this bolt system not only would be cheaper and easier to produce because of the way the camming system and style is, but these are also a lot less prone to breaking because this is a complicated mess. I'm not going to even attempt to disassemble that, but these are quite simple and easy. Alright, the straight pulls, greased properly, can outrun any flip bolt made, meaning turn bolt. I agree with that. The straight pulls are extremely fast. However, since we're talking bolt action rifles that have like 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 shot magazines, that arguing point really doesn't matter, especially in a world where semi-autos are just absolutely all over the place. Ammunition is still plentiful and affordable, unlike many other milsurp rifles. There are some milsurp rifles out there that definitely have climbed in price, like say 303 British or things like that, but 7.5 Swiss, I wouldn't exactly call it plentiful, but I'd call it about on par with cost as other new production rifle rounds. So I will give him that. It is still made, it is still out there, but it's not like plentiful like say 308 or 30-06, at least not here in the United States. They take a stripper clip better than any other rifle, plus the added benefit of quick mag change. I talked about the benefit of quick mag change. I don't like the stripper clips for these rifles. They're large and cumbersome and unnecessary. I definitely prefer something like these Mauser stripper clip, especially because they take up a lot less space and a lot less weight. The bayonets are priced to the point of nearly not being worth buying for a non-war horse whose bayonet was never used. So bayonets are expensive, essentially. Yeah, I don't own any Swiss bayonets. I don't, for the most part, I don't really go out and try to source bayonets for the rifles, because at those prices I could just go out and get myself another rifle. The accessories are plentiful and affordable to be able to authentically outfit yourself for your field service. And it says all clothes with the K31 is dumb. You know, the K31 is actually not my favorite military surplus rifle. I know I'm over here like, the K31 is a superior system over the K11 system. In all reality, I mean, the Swiss rifles, they're really nice, but personally, I would take a Mauser. I just like the Mauser system better. Accessories? I don't know about the accessories. I've never actually looked into accessories for these rifles. Oh, he says since they are straight pull handles, they're easier to get a stuck shell out because you can just set the butt on the ground and then essentially kickstart that son of a gun. So yeah, I could foresee that being easier to extract a cartridge that is stuck in comparison to like a Mauser, which you would have to like turn that bolt, but in order to actually turn that bolt, you have to extract that cartridge a little bit, just the way the system is designed. So, 100% on that one. Alright, now on to Movie Maker 225 K11. He says, I like the feel of the stock a bit better than the K31. I will admit, I do like the K11 stock better, but I think that's just because it feels more girthy. He says his has a 4.5 to 5 pound trigger brake. They do have fairly nice triggers for military surplus guns. His action is a little more stiff to open than a K31. That makes sense because the bolts are quite a bit more complicated. Say it's only slightly lighter than my K31, and I don't care for its 300 meter zero. I don't like whenever military surplus guns have this stupidly long zero, because of just how doctrine was back in the day and what they believed combat distances were going to be taking place at. Like I said, I don't like those because then you have to aim like way under your target if you're plinking at 100 yards, which is the distances that I normally shoot at. What is this one zeroed at? Yeah, this one has a 300 yard zero on it as well. So just one of those things. Alright, this says K31, so now he's talking about the K31. Front locking versus the K11's rear locking lugs. You get 2-inch... Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about the locking lugs real quick. What he's talking about, it's not really rear locking lugs, it's more of a mid-locking lug. On the K11 stylus system, you see the locking lugs are right here at the rear of the bolt, the rear of the bolt, and we have this big extension right there, which essentially the front of the bolt face is right here. That's where your cartridge sits. And we got just essentially this unsupported area right there that is not entitled to a locking system versus the K11, which the locking system is right there on the face of the bolt. These just tend to be stronger systems. Granted, it doesn't really matter what the cartridges that we're using. It'd be different if we were talking about anti-tank rifles, but I will say it is a stronger system, the K11, or the K31 over the K11. You get a 2-inch longer barrel while basically maintaining essentially the same overall length. The K31 is a 1/4 of an inch longer than the K31. Okay, that had to have been a typo. So, like I said, I don't have the K11 here. I only have the K31 and a essentially a long rifle 1911 model. I think it's the G11, if memory serves me correctly for that designation, but I'm not positive about that. I will have to look that one up. So I cannot compare the actual overall size of the carbines, however that's pronounced, but I'm willing to bet that that extra 2 inches probably isn't going to make or break anything. I don't know, sometimes 2 inches does make or break stuff, but not in this case. Alright, talks about the sight radius being a little bit longer on the K31 series. Sight radius is longer than the K11 on the K31. So, with that being the case, you might get slightly better accuracy, but the sight radiuses on both of these is already quite on par with one another. I don't think it's going to really make or break anything, especially, people hate whenever I say especially, get over it. But especially at the distances that most people are going to be shooting at, and the accuracy that most people have, unless you're stacking 1-inch groups at 1,000 yards, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. The length of pull is identical on both rifles. Alright, line up that with that. Yeah, they're pretty gosh darn close to identical. I will go ahead and admit that. Looks like our ejection port, because of the much smaller receiver on the K11, is just in a far better position. Okay. Alright, so bolt design with how this is. Very fascinating. Okay, so they both seem to have approximately the same length of pull. Very cool. Now, granted, it's not quite exact, but pretty gosh darn close. At least close enough for it to not really matter. Alright, length of pull is identical on both rifles. They both take the same bayonets. That's fantastic if you actually have bayonets. Same stacking rods, same 4 grooves, with a 1 in 10.3 right-hand twist. I don't think it matters whether it's a right hand or a left hand twist. I guess depending on what kind of cleaning rod it is that you're using to actually clean your rifles. But a 1 in 10.3, that means you should be able to stabilize anywhere from like 135 grain bullets up to about 225 grain bullets. So yeah, that should be pretty gosh darn adequate for basically all your 30 caliber rounds out there. Maybe I'll load up some 7.5 with some 220 grain bullets and we'll see how well that does. I imagine that like your 150 grain to 174 grain will probably be the most accurate out of this particular platform though. They both require central pressure on their stock near the muzzle. I don't understand that one. They both require central pressure on the stock near the muzzle. Is he referring to the way that the stock actually mounts to the rifle so you don't have issues with accuracy? That's probably what he's talking about. I'll have to do more research on that before I input my thoughts on it. And they both take the same charger clips. Again, I'm not a fan of the charger clips. Personally, I don't really use them. I don't really shoot Swiss rifles all that much. Although, for what it's worth, I did hand load a bunch of ammo for these, and I will be taking them out shortly. The K11's metal handle definitely will outlive the K31's metal handle will definitely outlive the K11's. I've already addressed that. And the K31 was cheaper to make overall in comparison to the K11. That's mostly because it's significantly less complicated and there's significantly less material. Alright, on to Geary Gunderson. I'll try and go through this a little bit faster. I know I'm kind of taking my time with it. Videos are getting kind of long. I don't want you guys getting bored. He says, my Swiss list. Alright, the thing I like most about them is both rifles in general. They are very interesting, from the straight pull system to the syringe looking safety. I will acknowledge that. They are very interesting looking rifles and they do look like they have syringe systems. I never pieced that together until now, but that just like filling a blank that I've always had in the back of my mind. That's awesome. Syringe style safety systems. That's really cool. The first time I saw one in a gun show sent me down the rabbit hole to learn more about them because they were unique in comparison to everything else. They're definitely unique rifles. I remember one time growing up, I think it was a Swiss K11. I saw a Swiss K11 at a gun store of mine, and they had it on the wall, and they're like, yeah, that's a Swiss Army rifle. And I was like, oh, it must be like a Swiss Army knife and have all sorts of things going on with it that you could do for a variety of different tasks. And I remember like looking at it and I was like, other than being a rifle, how does that thing work? Like, what else does it have going on with it? So I just kind of pieced it together with the Swiss Army knife, Swiss Army rifle, Swiss Army knife. That's just a little side note backstory of mine. They are finally made and always in good shape on the surplus market. Already discussed that. Excellent rifles. Didn't see a whole lot of, combat and whatnot, so they are oftentimes in good shape. I think the K11 is easier to load with clips. Never actually tried on a K11, so I cannot say anything about that. He says, I agree with other sentiments that the rubber keg is more likely to degrade. 100% true, as a matter of fact. This one right here has definitely degraded. That is an original one, and that is what that normally looks like. Eventually, that's just going to rot and fall off. The stripper clip system is novel. I think when they are in good condition, it's great, but being as they were designed to be disposable, the original clips that are hanging around today can be trash more often than stripper clips from other styles of systems. I think I can agree with that one. I think that they're made from like paper that's been compressed and waxed, if memory serves me correctly. And they have like they're just unusual and unnecessary for what system it is. It says, I don't generally need to worry about dropping a stripper clip on the ground and stepping on it, like for example with other styles of stripper clip out there. Never thought about that. These right here are definitely fragile stripper clips. So that is all of their points, and this video's gone on for a solid minute, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode. I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.